Welcome to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast. This is the podcast dedicated to people who want to speak more as a way to build their income and grow their business.
Well, welcome everyone. This is the Speaker Launcher Teleclass series. I am your host, Jane Atkinson. I'm the author of The Wealthy Speaker 2.0. Today's topic is leveraging your content and intellectual property, and I am really excited that our guest expert is Dan Miller. Now, I've been watching Dan for, about the past year, Dan? Just burn it up out there on the market. He's been building his fan base, selling product, creating best-selling books, and running just highly, highly successful events for the past, several years. And I wanted, Dan, if you could start out by telling us a little bit about your background before you became the author, speaker, content distribution machine that you are today.
Sure. The things that I'm doing today really kind of evolved. In as much as I like business strategy, I never really sat down and identified clearly what is happening today. Things just kept developing around me faster than I could keep up. But I have my master's in clinical psychology, was never really interested in traditional psychotherapy. I'm sure, as most people, my study in psychology was more for personal understanding than it was to develop a career path. So I just did fun things along the way. I'm an entrepreneur, and I had various kinds of businesses and enjoyed that. Used to bricks and mortar kind of businesses. And so this whole idea of leveraging intellectual capital really caught me by surprise. And once the door opened, it was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe what opportunities there are here. And that happened not until I was about 45 years old. So I had done a variety of other things, did not see myself as a coach, author, and speaker that I am today. But in doing those other things, again, this opportunity kind of showed up. Joanne, my wife, and I started teaching a Sunday school class at a period where I was in a really low spot myself, having just crashed and burned financially and kind of healing from that, but offered to teach a class on career life transitions and found that we were attracting not the 18-year-old who was deciding where to go to college or the 22-year-old who just lost his job at Burger King, but we were attracting physicians, attorneys, dentists, pastors, engineers, people like that who had an amazing background academically, but were saying, I'm not sure I'm on the right path. So it opened the door to this idea of coaching, using my counseling background, of coaching people, healthy people, through those inevitable transitions. And then in that, the idea of people asking me, I need to share what you just talked to us about in this class with my son-in-law who's been without a job for 3 months. What do you have that I can give him? And I didn't have anything. But with repeated requests, and of course I've developed very quickly as kind of a personal adage since then, if 3 people ask me the same question, I develop a product. So it was at that point that I developed a very rudimentary product that turned into then what became one of my New York Times best-selling books, 48 Days to the Work You Love. But it was simply a 3-ring binder with a couple audio CDs in there, printed on one side in very rudimentary form, but in about a 2-year period, I sold over $2 million worth of that little product, and it opened the door to this intellectual capital arena where if you have ideas that help people, you can give it to them in various formats, and they like to show their gratitude by giving you dollar bills. So it's been kind of a cool journey.
Wow. Well, listen, a little bit of housekeeping before we move forward, because 2 things. We're going to open up for Q&A at the end of the call, but if anybody would like to ask a question between now and then, email me, jane@speakerlauncher.com. And we're going to be using the graphic that you presented on the blog that you did a guest post on my blog. So you can find that in 2 ways. You can go to speakerlauncher.com/blog if you would like to look at that graphic. The post was called, how would you like it? What was that called again, Dan?
Have it your way.
Have it your way, sorry.
Yes.
And you can get that speakerlauncher.com/blog, or you can go on Facebook and you can find my Speaker Launcher page, Jane Atkinson, Speaker Launcher, and we have the graphic posted there on the page for you as well. So if anybody would like to take a look at this graphic that's kind of going to be the basis of our call today, they can take a look. And this graphic has really grabbed people's attention. So you started out, let's just kind of, you began as a coach, and that's something that we kind of see in the middle of the graphic there. And just kind of tell us the evolution. You created this first product, 48 Days, which turned into a huge book for you and really has been your brand for quite some time. How many years has that been for the 48 Days brand getting started until now?
I did my own little version that I described back in 2002 or 2003, 2004, and then it was published as a traditional hardback in 2005. I'm now working on a major revision that will be released in November of 2014 as the 10th anniversary edition of that book.
Oh, fantastic. So really the 48 Days brand has served you well, and it's been something that's had some stickiness to it. And obviously you tapped into something that people really, really needed. And we have to talk about, let's talk about how you filter things through for relevance, because you mentioned that briefly earlier. If people asked you the question, how do you decide what you're going to produce?
You know, that it sounds like a very simple formula, and I have used that sometimes even to my own surprise. The most profitable parts of my business today are in response to people saying, how can I do what you've done? So I had authors showing up. I never anticipated coaching authors, but I had authors showing up saying, how can I do what you've done with 48 Days? And hearing that repeatedly, I decided, let's do an event. We'll do it 3 times a year where we invite authors and other creatives to come here to our property just outside Franklin, Tennessee, and we'll teach them how to do that. Also, I had people saying, how can I develop and expand my coaching, as you obviously have developed your own coaching? So the same thing. We developed a coaching event that we invite people to. Out of that, we now have a coaching mastery program that people enroll in. But those things came as a result of people asking me, how can I do what you've done? So sometimes the real leverage, the real financial rewards are not in just continuing to do one thing, but in teaching other people how to do what we've done successfully.
Right, right. And 48 Days was such a success. What would you attribute the success of kind of that first? That was kind of the cornerstone piece. What would you say were some of the things that you did and that other authors who are on the line with us today could do to make their book a bestseller?
One of the things that I did in not really approaching this as an author, but just as a coach helping people, I didn't stand back wringing my hands hoping for a big fat publishing deal. I just got in the game, never talked to publishers, never talked to bookstores or libraries. I just produced that simple form of the message and made it available to people. And we did a lot of experimenting in kind of the early days of the internet marketing and had a lot of success with that. Another thing, Jane, is by developing a clear brand. A lot of people that I see, speakers and authors, are too generic in what they do and how they describe themselves. I had material originally that was find the job you love in 30 days. And then I discovered that many people were not interested in another job. And so that was a critical change from job to work, because work opens up some new models that are not just going in from 9 to 5. The other thing was to find the work you love in 30 days. 30 days is just a very generic number. It's like a week, a month, a year. Those don't get our attention. But this was back when 48 Hours was becoming popular as a TV show. And I thought, I'll bet we could get some brand recognition if I used the 48. Now, we didn't make it 48 hours, but 48 days. And when we did, it was like somebody threw gasoline on my business because people immediately started asking, you mean I really can change my life in 48 days? It was a number that somehow seemed scientifically derived. It got people's attention. They asked, can I really change my life in 48 days? And my response has always been, yes, you can, if you create a plan and act on it. And 48 days is, I think, ample time to assess where am I, get the advice and opinion of other knowledgeable people, identify 4 or 5 good options, do a little bit more research, choose the best one and act. And that has to do with decisions, whether it's what kind of work to do to get a new job, to start a business, or where to move, where to send your kids to college. We've used that same formula to help people through transitional times in their lives in a lot of other areas in addition to work.
Nice, nice. Again, if anybody has any questions, they can email jane@speakerlauncher.com. I'll do my best to try to keep up with those. And if they'd like to see that graphic, they can go out on Facebook and just search me, Jane Atkinson, Speaker Launcher, and you'll see the graphic that we're talking about. So one of the things that you've said is that, 48 days had some stickiness to it, and 48 days to the work you love is really quite a big promise. And so you're making me think about, well, what is it that I offer that, it's kind of, it's not very finite. Maybe something that has a little bit more finite to it would be a healthier promise. That's a great promise that you came up with.
It really made a big difference. If you do, here's another way that it makes a difference. If you do a Google search for career coaches, there's like 12 million sites that'll show up. I'm sure I'm in there somewhere, but I have no idea where. But if you do a search for 48 days, I own that. I mean, this is not some fancy SEO. It's just a distinct brand, and it keeps me front and center every day of the year without doing anything fancy on the back end. So there's so much power in terms of branding and positioning, distinguishing yourself from all the other players. If you have some kind of a promise that is memorable, that people say, I want that for me. So we see that again and again and again in the marketplace. And yeah, I encourage people to be careful about just being generic. What is it that makes you remarkable? I mean, Seth Godin talks about that. What is it that is your purple cow that makes you stand out, that makes people notice you, that makes people want to know more about you? And one of the things that in working with coaches and speakers and authors, we try to help them refine their statement about describing their expertise. Now, you can call that an elevator speech or whatever, but even professionals tend to be extremely generic. Well, I'm a dentist, I'm an attorney, I'm a teacher. I mean, those things are fine, but they don't lead to more engaging conversation. So you need to be able to describe yourself very succinctly, very quickly in the first 30 seconds of an interaction that makes people want to know more.
Right. Nice, nice. So we've got the graphic up, and we see all kinds of things, live events, product sales, speaking, etc. Let's start just kind of big picture with your team. Who do you have in place? And I want people to know that you may not have started there. I think probably you started doing things with 1 or 2 people and then kind of built from there. But let's just have an idea of your team today.
Sure, that's a great question. I have 0 employees. Now, we have a pretty robust business, but I made a decision to grow it in a very non-traditional way. So I have people who are involved who do specific things. I mean, we have, my bookkeeper and webmaster and people who do the newsletter and blogs and social media, all those kind of things. I mean, last year I think we had 33 1099s that we wrote for people. That means people who made significant income from my business, but none of those are employees. So that means I don't have heavy fixed overhead that I have to worry about. Those people are getting paid because they're producing results. They're generating revenue. So most of those are doing specific projects. And there are people who may spend 4 hours a month doing things for me. I don't really have anybody who's spending 40 hours a week. I mean, my daughter works with me, and she spends about 25 hours a week. Now, she and her husband have their own consulting company. I just happen to be their only client. I mean, that's the way that's set up. So it's kind of semantics in some ways, but it keeps the freedom there. I mean, I don't watch to see when she checks in or when she checks out. All I look for are the results being accomplished that we laid out. So I have everybody structured in just doing productive work, not putting in time in Dan Miller's office.
Gotcha.
But at any given time, Jane, I probably have 25 to 30 people who are doing, cover designs, layouts, editing, those kind of things. But again, we're small and very streamlined. Again, those people, a lot of them are going to, work for 5 hours on a project and they're finished for 3 months.
Sure. And I think having the right team in place, wouldn't you say that a part of doing the work you love is not being responsible for all of the work?
Oh, my goodness, would I ever. I mean, even in a small business like I have, I tell people there are probably 20 to 25 different things that need to be done. I probably am pretty good at 2 or 3 of those. That's about it. That's where I want to spend my time. I get a lot of requests for interviews. Podcast, TV, radio. Well, I have a gal who handles all of that. Those requests come in. They go immediately to her. She screens them to make sure there's a good fit, goes through all the details, how we're going to be connected, times, all those things. She handles all of that. So, and that's pretty much, all she does. So I have people who have specific task responsibilities, but I delegate. I mean, I'm constantly looking at my list, trying to look at what is it that anybody could do, because I only want to do the couple things that only I can do. And there's a whole lot of things in a little business like mine that other people can do very well. And really, being a pretty driven guy, I do tend to think that I can do it better and faster. So I force myself, if I think somebody can do it 70% as well and as fast as I do, I delegate it. I don't expect somebody to do it exactly as I would. But that's my rule of thumb. If I can find somebody to do it 70% as well and as fast as I do, I delegate it.
Nice. Well, I want people to understand that you are a content machine. I mean, there is stuff coming out and ideas flying. And so let's talk about the core competencies that you focus on, and then I'm going to go through each of the types of things that you do, and we'll help people understand how you do them, knowing full well that there are people on the line that may not have a team of 30 people around them. They may be doing things for a little while longer, but the idea is that they develop the income so that they can start to build their team. So what are your core competencies? What are the 3 things that you do yourself?
Well, I write, think, and create. I mean, those are things that are hard for me to delegate to other people. I mean, I have 2 book manuscripts that I'm working on right now. I write every word. I don't have teams that just pull it together and my name's on the cover. It's too personal for me. Plus, I enjoy it so much, so I don't expect anybody else to do that. My blogs, I do every single word every day. My podcast, pulling together listener questions, screening those, deciding who I'm going to respond to, doing the podcast itself, I do it 100%. So there are specific things like that every week that I alone do. But then leveraging those, which is really what we're talking about here, leveraging those is where I can easily engage other people. If I have a blog content, can I have somebody go search for 30 other places where that may have application? Sure. Can we, right now there's a new organization that is compiling content. They've got a new app. It's a real big, major dollar rollout, and they wanted content from me. Well, they wanted 75 pieces of content from me to be part of this launch. That's fantastic. No problem at all. Am I going to sit down and go through products that we've got, audio, ebooks, things that we could put into a digital format? I'm not going to do that personally, but I created everything initially. So it's just somebody sit down and look at now how can we leverage what I've created. In 2011, I was very open about the fact that I was going to create one new product a month. Now what happened in November of that month, I got a contract for a book, and the publisher wanted the manuscript by the 1st of March. That's a very short time window, and I wanted to do that. So I switched my efforts in that year so that the last 2 months were fully engaged in creating the manuscript, which then was my latest book, Wisdom Meets Passion. So in that year, I only created 10 new products. So do I cry myself to sleep because I didn't hit my goal? No. And that's the way that I set aggressive goals, so that if I hit 50% of it, I'm still going to be way ahead of the pack.
Nice. Okay, so I know that there was a big turning point for you when you started podcasting. Step us through how you go about creating it and then shooting it out there.
Sure. And Jane, if I could, let me give you a 30-second kind of prelude to that, why I love podcasting so much. When I first started doing a Sunday school class, we had about 30 to 40 people there and realized we were drawing people from other churches and other states. So we opened it up, did a community open seminar at the church, but did it on Monday nights rather than Sunday. And we would have 60 to 80 people there week after week. Then I had an opportunity to get on terrestrial radio, 100,000 watt station here in Nashville, Tennessee. So we got on that, had really good numbers, station loved us, great show, and tracking in 15-minute increments as they do, they were showing that we were having between 600 and 800 listeners, so a 10 times multiple of what we were doing in a live seminar. Then I started experimenting in 2009 with putting segments of the radio show up on iTunes, and it blew my mind. We were hearing from people from Ecuador and New Zealand and Norway and Sweden and Germany. We immediately increased our audience to over 100,000 people. That's why I love podcasting. So I'm not married to podcasting. You show me the next generation of technology that gives me that kind of a multiple on my audience, man, I'm gone. But right now, I don't know of anything that has a broader reach than podcasting. But here's how I do that.
And I think that's inspiring to people. That's inspiring, Dan. Why aren't more of us doing that? We should be doing that, for sure.
I love the format. I love the ease of technology rather than running down to the radio station, having to coordinate with producers and all that. In the first 2 years of doing my podcast, I used my little PC laptop. I did invest in a lapel mic that I got at Radio Shack. It cost me $19. So that was my investment. I downloaded a free program called Audacity and just did my podcast. That's all I did. Then I had, after a couple years of that and growing our audience as we were, had somebody gently tap me on the shoulder and said, would you be interested in improving the quality of your podcast? I said, well, sure, come on down. So I have a wonderful guy who coached me, set me up with better equipment, but I have everything right here in my office. I work in a remodeled barn on the backside of our property, and that's where I have all the equipment. There's nobody else involved when I do the podcast. All the dials are set properly. I flip on the switch, start talking, have a little musical intro where I use the old Bachman-Turner Overdrive song, Taking Care of Business. I have a license agreement with Sony to use that. So I just hit record, and I just talk through. I don't edit, don't go back. Then I upload that. Now, this is where it gets a little tricky because my understanding of technology is about a 2 on a scale of 10, and there are probably those on my team who would question that, but I am not a techie. But I do know how to upload that. They've shown me how to upload that to our FTP server, and then I send a note, an email note, to Cliff Ravenscraft, who's the guy who coached me in how to podcast well. He does his thing. He goes in, cleans it up, and then he makes it appear on our website and iTunes and Zoom and Stitcher and all those other places. So that's one of those guys that I have in place that does that. I don't know how it works, but I love the fact that I can just do the recording and then all the magic happens.
Nice. And maybe what I could ask us to do afterwards, Dan, is on that Facebook page where we have the graphic, maybe we could put the names of any suppliers or like Audacity or things that you use as a list, of a little resource list. Like, does Cliff looking for more people to help with their podcasts, or are you his only client in that regard? Does he do it on the side?
He is not looking for people where he does what he does for me, but he has a podcasting A to Z course that's killer that I refer people to all the time. Yeah, that he don't have to have people in.
That's the kind of thing that we'd like to refer. Because Cindy was just asking, please ask if he has a special phone service so his company sounds more professional when someone calls him. And, you know, the person that you use to screen requests for interviews, etc., how do you find that person? So I know that team is an important part of this equation, and the question might be, you know, what do you do to gather your team? So let's deal with the phone service one first. Is there anyone answering the phone, anything special or outside agency for you?
No. The questions that I answer in my podcast, if that's what the question is here, I read those. I have a service called SpeakPipe, which is easy to set up. People can leave an actual recording. I pack so much into my podcast, and frankly, I'm too impatient to allow people to just talk at their own speed. So somebody can call and leave, isn't that horrible? They call and leave a question. I can summarize in 30 seconds and go right into my response. So most of the questions that you hear, now once in a while, if it's really interesting, I'll include an audio one, but it just comes in through SpeakPipe. So there's no, I think that's a free service. They can just leave an audio message. It comes right in as an email, and you just hear it right there. But
I think she was just talking about who answers the phone at your office in general.
Nobody.
Okay.
I don't have anybody that answers the phone. Nobody will ever answer the phone when it rings here. We divert so much to online resources, and I can't find that it's justifiable to have somebody that sits and waits for the phone to ring. No, we just it just doesn't make sense for us. We would get so many calls. Now, I used to in the old days, and we would get hundreds and hundreds of calls. But those calls, I want to say this as graciously as possible, a lot of those calls were from people who just were looking for immediate answers at no cost. And we provide so many resources for people that are free, and so we welcome that. But I'm not going to tie up somebody on the phone to take 20 minutes to explain to 6 people today what we have in a ready answer on our website.
Right.
So nobody answers the phone.
I have felt guilty for really, I feel the same way. My process is really set up to circumvent the phone as well. And I have felt a little bit guilty, but you're making me feel a lot better about that, because it's true. When someone calls, they want to eat up 20 minutes of my time. And so I have kind of a process that I would like to send them through. And it annoys some people, but unfortunately, I don't want to spend 4 hours a day on the phone. So you're making me feel better. Thank you. Okay, so I think we've answered that question. What about the person who handles your requests for interviews, etc.? Is that a virtual assistant or someone that has been hired?
She is is both. She's a very competent lady who happens to be a neighbor who walks in the mornings with my wife.
Oh, nice.
So this is not some complicated high-tech process. I utilize people in my business who I know, like, and trust. So everybody that I have is somebody I know, like, and trust. Now, there are times when we do a book cover, as an example, or just the layout of a new workbook, and I just want that done, where we'll use an online service and may have somebody in Taiwan or Egypt who does the process. We use people like that. But for the most part, the people who are involved on a day-by-day basis are people that I know personally and people that I like.
Nice. Okay, that makes perfect sense. Let's dive into some of the things that are on the list and in the graphic. Let's start with live events. How did they come about? What does it look like today?
Live events came about because people were asking me. The first one we started doing was coaching, and people saw that I had had significant success in my coaching, and so they were asking, how can I do that? So we simply put together a 2-day event. They're Thursdays and Fridays, Coaching with Excellence, and we have people come. It's $1,000 for the 2 days. They come out here to our property. We limit it to 48 people, but we usually have about 60 that squeeze in, it seems. But it's 2 days. We spoil them with wonderful Southern catered meals and just have a blast together, but teach them the principles of how to go back and leverage their coaching. Now, what I do in our coaching and writing events, I don't spend a lot of time on the psychodynamics of coaching. People can get that in a lot of ways, and we connect them with a lot of great resources to get that. What we do is teach them how to have a business of coaching. 95% of coaches never make more than $40,000 a year. That's preposterous. If you have an area of expertise, we show you how to develop the business of coaching. Most of the coaching credentialing programs out there focus on the first part, the psychodynamics of coaching, how you engage, how you ask leading questions, do follow-up, accountability, all those necessary things. And we have people out here who are very skilled at coaching, and they don't have two nickels to rub together. We know that, so it's easy to attract people who are saying, wow, I want to be a coach, but I want to make $150,000. That's what we focus on in all of our events, not to just sound materialistic and greedy, geez, I don't want to do that, but it's where the big gap is for creative people. If it's authors, if it's musicians, if it's coaches, speakers, the gap is in how do I make money doing this? And that's really been that kind of sweet spot where all of our events kind of focus around it. That's why, just like here, Jane, the graphic that we're focusing on, I mean, it's, wow, a lot of speakers struggle with keeping food on the table. Well, my thing is, if you have an area of expertise, how could you leverage that, offer that to people in multiple ways, give them the choice, they are in the driver's seat, and it still creates revenue in a whole lot of different ways.
And you determined early on this year that what you thought you wanted to do in the world of speaking wasn't actually how you wanted to spend your time, traveling, doing an event, traveling home, 3 days off the calendar versus 3 days of productivity in your office. Talk about that for a minute, because I really want people to understand that this is your umbrella. This is your business model to design in whatever way is perfect for you. What we're hearing today is what's perfect for Dan, and I want the people listening to take what they want and leave the rest. It may be that you want to be on the road 150 days speaking. That is okay, but I'm trying to just let you see that there's lots of other opportunities here. So what do you think, Dan, about speaking?
Yeah, I appreciate your openness about that. I don't know if people know, but I've been in your coaching or speaking mastery program, and I love the process because it gave me so much clarity, even though the end result didn't lead me to where I thought I was going to go. But it has been a process of clarifying that my speaking, the most effective use of my speaking is doing interviews. And last month I did 28 interviews. That allows me to stay right here And I love being here in our property. I've got grandkids around. We got a zip line that needs to be used a couple times a day. I want to be here. So I decided, it became very clear, I didn't want to be out there and living out of hotels and airports. But my speaking has a different form. The speaking doesn't generate revenue directly, like being a paid keynote speaker. But I'm seeing very clearly how the speaking that I do leads to these other things because I have so many other things to offer people. So I don't have to be paid for my speaking itself. That's a feeder, just like my books really are. My books are a professional business card to lead people to the areas of my business where we actually make the money.
Nice. And so, you can cherry pick 10 perfect conferences for you to attend and be a part of that will massively increase your fan base. And I think that that's a really, really strong strategy for anyone. I mean, some people say, nope, I'm just all about making my money speaking and that's all I want to do. That's fine for them. But I think that there is another way to do it. And I'm happy to, happy to be sharing that with people.
I'm speaking at New Media Expo in Las Vegas in January. I'm speaking at Social Media Marketing in San Diego in March. I'm speaking at Michael Hyatt's launch event in Orlando in April. I mean, I've probably got those half dozen speaking engagements lined up already. None of those, I don't even, it's not an issue to me to negotiate speaking fee. If they'll pay my flight and give me a place to sleep, I'm golden because I'm speaking to audiences that are a perfect fit for everything else that I do.
Okay. Well, I don't want to run out of time here, so let's talk next about the types of products that you develop. You mentioned that in 2011 you wanted to do one new product every month. What are just some ideas of products that you're putting out there? And really, let's give the top maybe 6 most successful products that you've developed.
All right, sure. Here's a quick example. I was doing a radio interview with Moody Midday Connection out of Chicago. They have a massive women's audience, and we were pre-recording it because the host was going to be out of town for a couple weeks, and I've been on there many times, and she wanted to get a couple shows in the can. So we were pre-recording it, and she asked me, she says, Dan, I have so many women that ask about, can they be primary caregivers for their children but still create income out of the home? I said, oh, my gosh, there's all kinds of ways. I said, if you go to 48days.net and look for the yellow Post-it note, you'll find Dan's 48 low-cost business ideas, things you can do with virtually no money at all to start up where you can make reasonable income. We finished taping the show, and I said, Melinda, when is this going to air? Because I didn't have anything created like that. I just thought it would be a great opportunity to create a product, which I then did. We put that up as a free PDF download, and in a 3-week period, it was downloaded more than 90,000 times. So that tells me that's a really hot topic. So then we pulled it back in, we refined it, we turned it into a nice, clean digital product at $17 and a physical product at $20, and it continues to sell thousands and thousands every month.
Wow.
Now, here's another
title
one.
on that again. Dan, just give us the title again.
Sure. It's 48 low or no-cost business ideas.
Okay. Good. Okay,
now, here's another one. One morning I asked Joanne, my wife, I said, I need you to come over to my office. I was going to do a podcast. I said, people are always asking, how have we created the life that we have here, out in the country with the freedom we have to travel and things? How does she put up working with me? How do you work with an entrepreneur where there's nothing scheduled or fixed or predictable? I said, just come over. I'll just ask you questions. We'll just talk about that. So she did. She came over. No preliminary, getting ready, no list of questions. I just started talking to her. Well, it was one of those times where it was clear real quickly that this was more than an ordinary podcast. We both got very emotional talking about some of the things that we've been through leading up to where we are now. I stopped the recording. We did a second 48 minutes. And I said, you know what? This is more than a podcast. This is a product that people have been asking about for years. We titled it Living, Loving, and Working. And with just what I described. So one morning, spontaneously, no preparation, it's a 2-part audio set, Living, Loving, Working. Put it in a little Amray case. My son designed a cover that we slide in. So the product, the CDs are 76 cents a piece. So we have less than $2 in the product. And we sell that for $37. And again, I don't know. I'm sure we've sold 10,000 of them. I need to look at the numbers. But it's been a really substantial seller for us. Here's another one. Just a few months ago, I wrote an ebook. I've talked repeatedly about the power of a mastermind group, being in a mastermind group, and what it's done for me over the years. So I just did a little bit of research. I have people say, well, gee, can I be in your mastermind group? Well, no. Start your own. And so the next question is, how do I do that? Again, what do I do? When 3 people ask me the same question, I create a product. So I wrote an ebook on how to create your own mastermind. Well, that little ebook, it's about 60 pages long. We sold it for $17. Got a whole lot of traction. Some young hotshots did exactly what I laid out. Wrote a couple blogs about how they put a group together, and in 90 days, half the people in the group doubled their income, 3 started new businesses. Some of those kind of things got picked up by a couple national magazines, and we sold the fire out of that little ebook. Guess what? I pulled that off the market because it's such a hot product that I've now developed it into something at a little higher scale. So now we've done a video series where I have 8 videos. They're all short. All of them total exactly 60 minutes. So they're like 6-7 minutes long on how to create your own mastermind group. Historically, what happened, how to select your members, how to conduct a meeting that's productive, how to keep things going. So that video has been done. Now we're just in the process. We've already edited all the videos. The PDF is done. The startup sheets and all that are there. And we're going to put that up on sites like Udemy, where they have exposure to massive audiences. They have over 2.5 million registered students already and are growing significantly every day. So we're going to have it there in addition to on our own site. Let's just take our own site. Now, I've had the good fortune of selling quite a few traditional books. If I have an arrangement with a publisher where I write a book and the royalty on the back end gives me $1.50 per book, which would be pretty typical, they sell 10,000 copies, I'm going to make $15,000. You're not really going to change my financial future a lot. What if I have a video course, so it's a little more robust product. It's really a hot trend in education right now, and we put that up for $48, which is what we're going to do. What if I sell 10,000 of that, which our projections, of course, are far more than that? If I sell 10,000 of that, that's almost $500,000. It's just a different way, having recognized the market has already told me, wow, this is a hot topic. So I'm just offering it to them in another format. That's how I'm looking at products every single day. And I eliminate a lot of products. You don't find old stuff on our site because I'm constantly tweaking it, pulling it out, updating it, so we just keep a fresh approach in the market.
Nice. And I want to make sure people heard Udemy is UDEMY.com. And does Udemy take a cut when you put things out on theirs?
They do. It's interesting you ask. I had the vice president of Udemy on as a podcast guest recently. Really neat guy, neat company, and they were taking 30%. They just changed that as of a week ago. They're now taking 50%. So it changes. It changes a little bit. But even so, okay, so what if I did a product where on their site, having done it once, I put it on their site, we sell 10,000 units, it's $480,000. Wow, they're going to take half of that. I have to just suffer through only getting $250,000.
But they have the audience that you don't have. That's the key right there. And they may pull people over into your fan base, right?
Do you think maybe we have that PDF set up to give people incentive to become part of the 48 Days community? Yeah, about 20 times. Absolutely.
Okay. Good. All right. I know there's a lot more we can cover. Let's do one more product idea, and then we'll open it up because I want to make sure people get a chance to ask a question. And let me just look at my little cheat sheet here. I think it's, hang on. You go ahead. Let's hear another product, Dan. I just need to grab
sure. Another format that I really like is more of an instructional manual. So having worked with authors and doing live events that we called Right to the Bank, it was very easy to create a product. And people that come to a live event here pay $1,000. They've got travel expenses. So you're going to limit somewhat your reach with that particular offering. What if we take the same content and make it available in an instructional manual? Now that I like to put in a 3-ring binder. A 3-ring binder still has a higher perceived value, even though we could easily get all the information in there in a little perfect bound 7x9 book. But a little 7x9 book, people don't pay $197 for. If I have it in a 3-ring binder, and Jane, we often do a demonstration in our live events here where I take that and drop it on the floor because I tell people I'm looking for the thump factor. The louder the noise when it hits the floor, the more you can charge for it. So even in this digital age, we have really robust physical products. So that one, Right to the Bank, came out of a live event. We don't do the live event anymore. It's morphed into something that expands for creative people. So, but we still have the product, Right to the Bank. One of those things, I did it a couple years ago, sells every day of the year, $197, but it has that, when you're talking about how-tos, this is not just how to feel better about yourself or how to increase your self-esteem, but the how-tos that can lead to people making money, those products, we can put pricier prices on those, and that's $197. I've got a lot of examples of doing that. I love those kind of launches where we do it in a 3-ring binder. We've had a lot of success with those.
Nice, nice. Now, if anybody wants to ask a question, they can hit 5-star on their phone, and that's going to show me that you're raising your hand. I think we might have time to do, while people are doing that, Dan, we could do one more product idea. What else has been a real big idea for you? And I want to go back and reiterate for Bonnie, Udemy is udemy.com, udemy.com. We'll put those out on the Facebook page. Go to Facebook and search Jane Atkinson, Speaker Launcher, and we'll try to put some of the follow-up ideas from here and the links for you. Okay, you got one more idea for us, Dan?
Sure. Well, the one we haven't talked about are traditional books. I've worked with publishers like Random House and B&H Publishing and Thomas Nelson. Those have been wonderful relationships. But some people would see that as being kind of the coup d'etat, where you get a publishing deal. To me, I see that at the bottom of the barrel in terms of what it does financially. It's just at the bottom. Do I like the expanded marketing that publishing companies can do? Sure. We've had products in Costco and Sam's and certainly, Books A Million and Barnes and Noble, places that I would never be able to negotiate as an individual. So I love the expanded reach. So there's that. I don't want to diminish that, but what I really wanted to focus on our call today is people don't need to be a published author to do anything that we've talked about up to this point. And even with my options at this point, I see that not as the ultimate goal. I see that as just kind of one of the starting points so that you really position yourself to leverage your message in meaningful and profitable ways.
Nice. And, really what I think people maybe misunderstand, they think, I'm going to get with a big publisher and they're going to do all this promotion for me. But they really are not necessarily promotional machines, but they're pretty good at distribution. They print the books and they distribute the books out to their normal channels, bookstores, etc. But what I've discovered over the past 20 years in this business, that the best way to sell books is to get out and speak and develop a fan base on your own. That's if you go and you speak in front of 1,500 people and you're at the back of the room autographing books for 2 hours, that's a heck of a lot better than trying to sell one book at a time in a bookstore where people may or may not know you. So I think you're actively developing your fan base, which is what is selling and driving all this product. So really, you don't really need those big name publishers anyway. 48 Days really was very helpful in terms of establishing your brand, but you're beyond that now. Tell us what you have done to continually expand your fan base. I know podcasting has been one thing that we've touched on. What are some other things that you do in terms of social media, et cetera, to continually expand your fan base?
Sure. Yeah, great question, and we're very intentional about that. In August of 2000, I sent out a digital newsletter with career tips in it. I sent that out to the 67 people whose email names I had. We've never purchased advertising, done anything very fancy, but I just told those people, if you enjoy it, share it with your friends. I'd talk about it when I spoke, tell people it was available, and we've had over 130,000 people who have signed up for that newsletter now. So there was that, and that was back before, now that was in 2000. So again, not that long ago, but that was back before anybody heard about blogging or podcast. As that technology came along, then I started doing that as well. Now, interestingly, a couple years ago, our newsletter subscribers used to increase by 1,000 a week, and then it kind of leveled off. And I thought, well, that makes sense because now we're getting a lot of people signing up for my blog and podcast, so maybe the newsletter is kind of old hat. I don't need to do that anymore. We ask our listeners, readers, survey questions all the time. Give them a chance to be interactive with us and to give us their feedback. So we asked, the newsletter subscribers went ballistic. Don't you dare take this away from us. And what I discovered is, rather than somebody reading my newsletter, listening to my podcast, getting my blog, those were different audiences, which was really helpful to me. So we'll continue the newsletter forever. That's fine. But it takes me about 10 minutes to put the newsletter together every Thursday, and then it goes to my assistants, and they do their thing, and it shows up on Friday. But what that means is I can repurpose content. So I take the hottest blogs from the week. I take a little content from the podcast. All I'm doing is repurposing content I have in other places. And that's one of the things that gives us so much leverage in this intellectual capital space. You don't have to come up with that much original stuff. My goodness, my books at this point, the reason I can put a book manuscript together in 90 days is because all I'm doing is pulling from content I've already created. I'm just pulling it together in ways that go together topically and in chapters, and I've got a book. Does it make sense that people can go on my website, get anything that I'm writing free, and now they're going to pay for it? We don't even try to understand that. We just know they do, and we give them the opportunity to do that again and again and again.
Oh, that's funny. Listen, if anybody would like to ask Dan a question, you would hit on your phone 5*, and that will show me that you're raising your hand, and I'll go ahead and unmute you if anyone would like to ask Dan a question. Let's circle back to something Carol was asking about your podcast. Once you've cleaned up the file and you shot it out to the FTP, what happens to market it? Is there anything that helps to get it listened to on YouTube? Do people already subscribe to the podcast? What do you do to help promote it?
Wow, we've got several different pieces moving at any given time. So again, I'm not good with understanding SEO or analytics or any of that. I just do a lot of things, and in compilation, it seems to continue to work pretty well. But the podcast goes up, of course, on iTunes. Now, I'm consistently either number 1, 2, or 3 under careers in iTunes, and it's interesting because there places like Time Warner and Fortune Magazine and these multi-million-dollar companies, and here I'm, one little farm kid sitting out in a pasture in Franklin, Tennessee. You can compete if you're creating interesting, compelling, engaging content. So I don't do anything fancy to promote that. However, in addition to the podcast itself is not a business. Podcasting is just a marketing tool to draw people in. So we have the live events. We have blogging, the newsletter. In addition to that, I do interviews pretty much every single day. All of those things are letting people know about that podcast. I mean, I am speaking at these major conferences coming up on podcasting and blogging. Lets a whole lot of new people know I'm a player in that space. So I'm very active, and I've got a lady who her only responsibility is social media. So she's doing tweets and Facebook updates, responding to comments on Facebook, all that. I haven't been on Facebook. My gosh, I don't know that I've been there this year. But we have a very active Facebook presence. And that's something that I delegate. So one of the things I worry about sometimes in talking to audiences, Jane, is that they get the sense that, it's just too overwhelming. They can't do everything. I don't do that. I do very few things and don't even understand a lot of what I'm referencing here. But I have people who do. And so I just turn them loose on doing that. Another thing, and as an addition to what I mentioned a little bit ago, how we leverage that, also 3 years ago, I started a social networking site, 48days.net. Now, it's a free site, and we screen people to get into that. They have to fill out a form, and then I have a team that screens that. But we have about 14,000 people at this point, and these are all people who are exactly what we're talking about here. They're authors, speakers, coaches, writers, musicians, artists who are saying, I want to get in the game. And these people help each other, share resources. It's an amazing thing to watch. I'm not very active there. I have a 12-person advisory team. They monitor everything that goes on in that community. Now, one of the things I ought to mention here, when I talk about all these people that I have involved that do all these wonderful things, there's an example. I have a 12-person advisory board. They oversee all the blogs, the forum questions, the groups, the events that are being posted, new member applications, everything. I can go to China for a month, and it doesn't make any difference. Those people are just volunteers. That's the beautiful thing about doing something that gets people excited. They want to be a part of something that's happening. They're all volunteers. I tell them at the beginning of every year, now, your contract's going to be just like it was last year. Your pay is going to be just like it was last year. Nothing. Do you want us to continue doing this, or do you want me to find a new volunteer? And people, just without exception say, oh, my gosh, I want to do this. Because here's what's happened. A lot of those volunteers have exploded their own business. It gave them visibility as well. That's why the new word in business today is not competition, it's collaboration. I am the biggest fan of people around me who are being successful. I promote them, I talk about them, and it brings more and more people to the forefront who want to help me in doing what I'm doing. A lot of the things that my podcast, all that fancy stuff that happens, I don't pay him anything, but I promote what he's doing in the podcast space because he's amazing. But that's the kind of agreement we have. A lot of the people that I've referenced that do things for me, I don't write any kind of paycheck for them. It's just a mutually beneficial arrangement.
Dan, we're running out of time here, and we have a couple of people who wanted to ask questions. I'm sorry they came on a little bit late here. Let me go ahead and see if we can get it's either Tad or Ted unmuted here. Is it Tad or Ted? Oh, hang on.
It's Tad.
There we go.
Yeah.
Tad, go ahead with your question real quick here. We're just about out of time, and we'll try to get to one more after you if we can.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Dan. This is great information. My question was about the web. Did you learn how to code? Do you know, or how do you get all your stuff on the web? Is it kind of similar to what you just explained, where you have someone who just helps you and you help them, they help you? And how early along in the process did you bring someone on to handle all of your stuff going on the web?
Yeah, great question. I know zero about coding. I mean, HTML might as well be, GYQF. It means nothing to me because I know nothing about it at all. Now, the interesting thing is websites have become much more user-friendly. At this point, my web team has it set up. It's pretty dangerous, but I can actually go in there and change something. I don't do much, though. Yeah, that's all done by our product promotions that go out. I have no idea how to create a landing page for a product. Nothing at all. But my daughter does that, and she can do it in 10 minutes. So again, I have people around me, but no, I do none of that.
Let's see if we can get to one more question here.
Sure.
Anne, did you want to go ahead and ask your question real quick? We're going to run a little bit long, so I'm afraid I have to speed it up.
Well, I was wondering this is Anne from Austin. I was wondering how you go about getting radio interviews. You said that was a great way to get your name out there, and I'm probably doing 2 or 3, speaking engagements a week, but have not ventured into the radio interviews and just wondered what you do to kind of launch that.
At this point, Ann, and I appreciate your question, at this point, in all honesty, I do nothing because we get so many requests. But if you're at the point where you're wanting to stimulate that, have an interesting hook. I mean, I have a friend who is an author, speaker, and he has a book on relationships. Well, I said, you need something that's a hook. There's a whole lot of books out there in relationships. What he came up with is this. This was when we were having a lot of young kids, who were going to Iraq and Afghanistan. He came up with, how do you say goodbye to somebody when it may be the last time you ever see them? That was his hook, and it prompted flood of TV and radio interviews. So that's really what you have to do. Take something in your message so you're not just an expert on a generic topic, but there's a hook. And if you put that out there, write blogs like that, media people are watching those. Do PR releases. Use PR Web and other free services. Get the message out there. Tie it to something that's currently in the news or to a popular quotation or a radio or a song title, and you'll have people that start knocking on your door. Radio people are looking for good content to fill their time, believe me.
Nice. Thank you so much, Dan. I know that people are going to have some more questions, so what I'm going to suggest is that they can come out and I'll make sure that you see the questions. We'll put them over on our Facebook page, so Facebook / or if you just search on Facebook, Jane Atkinson, Speaker Launcher, you'll see the graphic and you can ask your question above that. And we're going to go ahead and post a few ideas out there. Dan and I maybe could go back and forth on email and get a couple of ideas suggested as follow-ups. We'll put the Udemy link out there. We'll put Audacity out there. And Dan, if people want to get in touch with you, what should they do?
They can email me directly at dan@48days.com. If they want to get involved in the community I was mentioning, where there's a whole lot of other people who are kindred spirits, that's 48days.net.
Good stuff. Well, listen, I thank you so much for giving us all of these great ideas. I know a lot of people will be hanging up and going out and taking action.
I hope so.
I'm pretty sure there are going to be people who will want to know who's on your team. The team member, I know that there's a lot to that. Who do you use for this? Who do you use for that? So we'll try to provide a little bit of that. If any of your team members, Dan, are looking for more customers, we should maybe put their links out on the Facebook page.
Okay.
Thank you so much for providing us with just this massive, massive amount of ideas and, kind of opening the kimono so that we could see what's going on back there behind this 48 Days massive empire.
Hey, it's been my pleasure, Jane. I'm honored to be your guest today.
Oh, thank you so much. And I'll look forward to talking to you again real soon. Thank you, Dan.
Thanks for listening to the Wealthy Speaker Show. Please visit speakerlauncher.com for your free Wealthy Speaker audit and visit speakerlauncher.com/podcast for show notes and many more resources to help you catapult your speaking business. See you soon, Wealthy Speakers.